everyone. We're here to talk about how to make ethical decisions about the technologies that we're developing and how to build a great business in the process. Because most of us probably live in capitalistic societies where there are strong market forces at play. We have to operate within that environment. Joining me today to talk about this are Eugene and Jennie, who are both self-proclaimed techno-optimists. And before we begin, I should say that I do work at MIT Technology Review, which, like a lot of other publishers, has signed an agreement with ProRata, which is the company that Eugene has co-founded. So Jennie, I'll begin with you. Tell us, what's the main message that you're trying to get out these days through the Ethical Tech Project?
So at the Ethical Tech Project, our goal is to shift the tech innovation ethos from move fast and break things to think first, then make things, and try to make things that are better for individuals, for your business, and for society more broadly.
And Eugene, why did you co-found ProRata?
So our founder and CEO, Bill Gross, approximately December 2023, read an article about the New York Times suing OpenAI. Bill recognized that when there is a suit, it is just business failure. In creating ProRata, we attempted to solve a business failure related to how do content creators get compensated in an era of AI generation. Because ultimately, we believe that unless content creators are compensated for the content that they create, there won't be a future for either content creators or generative AI.
And Jennie, tell us about this approach that you've laid out at the Ethical Tech Project. What does it have employees of tech companies or who are working to develop technologies doing that's different than what they might be doing today?
Sure. So how we deliver on our mission is that we educate, convene, and equip tech and AI builders. And we do that in a number of ways. But our flagship program is a fellowship based on a curriculum that we developed with Columbia University's Digital Futures Institute. And through this curriculum, we train early to mid-career tech and AI builders in order to understand how they can change their thinking, open their aperture, and make better choices. And we do this because I myself spent my career as a builder, and I think as builders, we are largely optimists. We want to do the right thing, but what do we get off on is a stakeholder or a business problem, and somebody says, oh, can you build this? Can you solve this problem? We're like, yes, that's exactly what I do. And we go all heads down and to deliver our product, but rarely are we trained to do or say like, ooh, but should I build this? Is there another way to do this? Do I have the skills to push back on my stakeholder and work through other options and to debate the trade-offs in doing this? So that's very different than how we are trained as technologists and working within companies. And we haven't seen a single company that does this kind of training.
And your approach, it does put a lot of responsibility on the employee who is building the technology. So tell me, what do you think is the right level of responsibility to hold employees like this accountable to for products that their company is building, especially if they're like a small part of a bigger team?
I just want to give you an example here because I actually would love to see this kind of training come to companies. And we have reached out to a number of hyperscalers to bring this work in and the large AI companies. And I'll just give you an example of one of the builders that we trained is somebody who interned at one of the hyperscalers in college. She went there. When she graduated, she was hired to do AI safety engineering on their consumer-facing chatbot. When she arrived, she said, is there training for me? Is there a framework I'm supposed to work off of? And they said, you're smart, you'll figure it out. And she said, but I'm 22. So I actually think it's very unfair for this onus to be on these employees. On the other hand, the companies are failing to fill this void. And also, builders have really disproportionate leverage. And a lot of times when we work in companies, we think there's some CEO who's telling us exactly what to do. But most of us work on 2 pizza teams. That's like 10 people. And we have a lot of influence in making our decisions and what we bring and what gets laddered up to the company's strategy. So I think that solutions come where there are none. And so while I hate to put the onus on individual people, it does start with individual people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Eugene, from your position, tell us what it means to you and what it looks like in practice to build and lead a tech company with a moral compass.
Well, ultimately what, as I indicated, ProRata is trying to do is create an environment where ultimately both content creators and generative AI companies succeed. And so we have a very, very clear vision. And the clear vision is rooted in ultimately creating a business model that works for both creators and generative AI, large generative AI companies. And so we do not believe that doing work that is ethical is incompatible with creating a successful, thriving business with an incredible business prospects. And so, especially from the perspective of being a leader in an AI company that is working on this, some of what Jennie was talking about resonates deeply with me because some of it is about creating the safe spaces within a company so that somebody has the ability to raise their hand and say, are we doing something that is in line with our mission? Is it in line with what we believe is right for not just our company, but for the ecosystem at large? And so it isn't difficult, per se, to lead a company that is attempting to do ethical things in technology, especially when it comes to AI. It's being true to sort of what our company is doing in terms of purpose and making sure that those values are communicated not just to our employees, but that we live by that on a day-to-day basis when we are building products that ultimately, hopefully, will change the world.
Eugene, your company actually addresses a potential harm and hazard, but many companies are just working on stuff and they don't really think about unintended consequences. And one of the things that we look at is that it's not just, you don't have to be building some ethical or for good product, but by building ethically, you really reduce risk in your organization, you save money because you have a more chance to avoid mistakes and design for unintended consequences or design in line with what your stated purpose and your investors and shareholders expect of you.
I'm curious, what do you think about that approach in a different industry? Would it still work in a case where there's a large externality that's not accounted for, that you can't price into products like greenhouse gas emissions and climate change? Like, what does it look like when there's not a clear business case on both sides of the equation?
I mean, it's a really, really good question. And I mean, sort of outside of like pure AI technology, you take a look at companies in sort of like the electrical vehicle space, right? Clearly, there's, in the case of electric vehicles, a role for government incentives to try to accelerate the market. But take a look today, they're incredibly successful in terms of the amount of market share they're taking away from traditional, conventional fuel automobile companies. But if you broaden the aperture to sort of the history of technology companies, one of the things that we like to talk about within our company is that ultimately, if you take a look at the history of content-oriented companies, Napster was a company that I think everybody recognizes was originally in the music space, pirated a lot of content. They paved the way for legitimate business models such as Spotify, such as Apple Music. And ultimately, Napster has gone out of business. And it goes to show you that ethics and being able to create a sustainable business model is compatible with creating great sustainable businesses.
Yeah, what you're saying there makes me also think it's about being able to think long term and maintain that perspective and what in the long run will turn out to work to your advantage and be aligned with society's progress in different ways as well. Well, Jennie, can you give us any positive examples of organizations that you think are doing a good job of stewarding their AI today?
Okay, well, I'd like to talk beyond AI because there's a lot of tech use cases. I think AI is very sexy at the moment, but let's talk about one that goes to greenhouse gases, AI, and doing something good. There's a company called Scope 6 that some of you have heard of, and they are tracking the carbon footprint of the ad tech stack, and now they're doing it for the AI stack so that you can understand how much energy and greenhouse emissions you're creating. And that actually helps you as a company. It's a great service because you can reduce costs by reducing your usage and focus rather on maybe using a LLM to using a small language model, making some other choices if you understand what's happening. So that's a great example of a company. Another young company that I really love is a company that's fighting a mental health gap called Soul Health, where they're matching mental health trainees. So if you've got a degree in social work or psychology, I think 50% of those people do not go on to be practitioners, and there's a complete lack of mental health providers. And so she matches trainees with supervisors and clients so that they can get low-cost care. Those are just two examples of kinds of companies that are running really good businesses. And doing them in a good way.
Yeah, those are great examples. And is there anything you've seen recently that has given you concern or made you realize that there's more work to be done in this area?
There's a lot more work to be done, and I want to just talk. I don't know how many went to Max Tegmark's talk on Center Stage, where he talked about the sort of superintelligence, alignment, and 95% AI. But after that, Microsoft came out with their announcement that they're doing humanistic superintelligence. And, you know, somebody said to me, like, oh, are they finally doing the right thing? And I said, you know, I think it's a step in the right direction, but they focused on 3 areas, which was medical superintelligence, energy, and then the third one was AI companions for all. So one of those things is not like the other. And I think AI companions can be a real benefit to people who are socially isolated because they have an illness, they're old, whatever. But AI companions for all is like very, very generalist. And then at the end of that post that Microsoft made, they said, you know, look at all the jobs we have in this field. And if you look at the jobs, they are the same series of AI engineering jobs and then 2 PR jobs. So I think that a lot of people might be saying the right thing, but we're not yet aligned on doing the right thing, just as one example.
And if I can also sort of talk about sort of the downside risks, right? Like, I think that a lot of us in the AI space saw the most recent settlement that Anthropic had with the book publishers, $1.5 billion for training on books without consent, when clearly it was not fair use. And so it goes to show you that if you don't do things in an ethical manner, there are true business costs as well.
I'm curious for either of you, you know, what's ethical to one person might not be ethical to another person. So how do you account for this in your approaches?
I'd like to take this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think that if it was easy to be ethical, we would all be ethical all the time because everybody wants to do the right thing. These things are always in conflict or in tension. So for example, child safety, I think we're all for child safety. That is often at odds with freedom of speech or privacy, right? So these things are often in tension. And one of the things we do in the Ethical Tech Project is help people design their own sort of code of ethics or moral code values, which helps them see through the lens when they're making those tough decisions. What are the trade-offs they're willing to make, and which are they not? Where do they draw the line?
And Eugene, yeah, what does that look like at Pro Rata? Like, is it a mission statement and a set of values, which I feel like every company kind of does, but like is there something deeper there going on?
So it's a great question, and it goes deeper than just sort of having a mission statement and values. It's actually a combination of, from a senior leadership perspective, standing up and telling people that we live the values on a day-to-day basis in the decisions that we make within the company. But it's also giving permission to some of the employees that Jennie was mentioning, your younger employees, your employees who are sort of heads down on a large project, they're responsible for creating a piece of code, let's say, and saying, look, if you have concerns, raise your hand. There are safe spaces in order to talk about this. You can do it in the context of larger meetings. You can come to an executive like myself to talk about it. And I would say that there is a responsibility for senior leaders to create those safe spaces within companies so that you can have the discussions about clearly what is ethical, what is not ethical, because as you indicated, Jenny, there isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all definition for what is considered to be ethical.
I want to talk about the fact that you're a leader at you're the executive and founder, and I was in a C-suite at a large company before this. And I think that often the rank and file are scared to come bring problems to their bosses because the bosses don't want to hear it. And especially in this AI world, everybody is being told that we need to move faster, we need to leverage AI, we need to do more. And the execs are like, we have to go faster, we have to go faster. And they definitely don't want to hear, can we slow down? I'm worried about this. But not slowing down and taking stock of those things can cause enormous reputational risk that can completely torpedo your company. And we're seeing a lot of examples, in a lot of areas today, and that's one of the things. The failure of regulation becomes the failure of businesses.
I think that's all we have time for today, but thank you all for showing up and sticking through to almost the end of Web Summit. I hope this conversation gave you some things to reflect on as you make your way home later. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jenny and Eugene, for the conversation.
Thank you, Amy.